Okay, good evening. I'd like to call the city council work session of Wednesday, May 29th to order and ask for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Okay. And welcome to the planning commission and the design review board. And so first we'll start out with public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make public comment? Yeah.
Jan Siebert Ormond and Wes Ormond, my husband, P.O. Box 778, Cannon Beach. Dear Mayor, councilors, planning commissioners, and DRB members. Many of us are drawn here by the beauty and bounty of Mother Nature. It's our responsibility to remember to respect the water, trees, and wetlands, as well as the birds, fish, and all wildlife who live here with us and near us. We all need a place to live. We all depend on, as do future generations, are using only what we truly need. Let's look at our housing with consideration for all of us together. When we build new, affordable, and workforce housing, let's make sure it's done exactly for that purpose, that it remains so, and not just loosen our previously carefully created regulations for false promises of affordability, which unfortunately has happened here in the past. My husband, Wes, and I were once renters in Cannon Beach. And now, while owning a small home here, we still struggle to make ends meet. We know how it feels to be housing insecure. Please, let's be mindful as we move forward with our housing decisions. Let's remember our responsibility to our community's people and to our unique natural environment. Everything we do here matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience like to make public comment? Is there anybody on Zoom that would, if you would raise your hand, if you would like to make public comment? Okay. Bob Copper. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will go ahead and move into our discussion item. This is a code rewrite joint work session with Planning Commission and Design Review. And Marcy, are you ready to
Prepared to
send row?
give you an update, yes.
Okay, great.
Hi, thank you for being here again. I'm here to report what happened at the Housing Focus Group workshop the week before last. And I have some proposed code amendments that I'd like to discuss to present. But I also want to give you just a whole picture of what the focus group participated in over the course of 2 days that were very intense and educational and productive. I think it was a very enjoyable experience for me. So I'm going to go through a visual recap of what happened on those 2 days, and it will also give me a chance to tell you about what's in the packet. So some of the material that I'm going to be presenting is in your packet, but what I did over the last couple of days was add a couple more visual examples that we studied during the housing workshop that weren't included in your packet.
Good, thank you.
So we had a multi-day housing workshop, also known as a charrette, but it was just for the housing focus group. And I think that was a really smart decision to kind of keep it to a very small group and have really, really detailed discussion, it allowed us to get to, I think, more specific proposals. I'm going to skip over this page, but we did have kind of a request that, people, we're here to seek understanding, we're here to share. It's not a debate to win. And I think the spirit of the group was very, very much in that nature. So I was very happy about that. I started out, if we could go to page 2, I wanted to bring everyone first day back to the information that we've been receiving from the housing event that we held when we had Alyssa Gertler come from Clatsop County and share information about housing terms. What is affordable housing? What is workforce housing? What is area median in getting over something that I caught last week, so I may cough now and then. So I wanted to make sure that we all remembered those terms that we've learned about affordable housing being 60% area median income, workforce housing being 60 to 100% area median income, and then market rate being above that. And, also reviewing what is area median income, what is it for Clatsop County? And then what we were able to do, thanks to Alyssa, was actually tie this information to affordable housing examples along the bottom. The ribbon shows here some of the jobs that are needed to pay for housing in those different categories. So it was a chance to kind of index our understanding to affordability. And the next slide was a recap of all of the during that period that we had the survey open, and then also people came and spoke for, I think it was 3 hours, an evening that I think was very meaningful to the project. So I wanted to just remind everyone that we had 281 responses in a 30-day period around this size. And of those people said that they believed there was a lack of affordable housing in Cannon Beach. 81% of respondents said that Cannon Beach is failing to live up to its comp plan policy, which is encourage the development of housing which meets the needs of a variety of ages. And that the top 2 factors that people named making it difficult to find housing were the cost of housing and the lack of housing for rent. And then on top of this, kind of layering, the third slide shows that, and I've been told by Robert that this information is close, but there's some precision that needs to be worked into here. But the numbers are still very meaningful in that we have housing here. Non-primary residences make up 52% approximately of the supply. Short-term rentals make up about 11%, and primary residences are about 37 or 40%. So as Alyssa put it, you might remember, she said, there's enough housing here for the people here, but there's not enough of it is for living in. So what I did next slide is just sort of like put it all together and ask people to use all this information in their heads over the next couple of days that we discussed potential code amendments that could address the issues. Next is the page, a handout that Alyssa prepared specifically for our multi-day workshop, where she laid out the different kinds of affordability programs that we would be trying to incorporate along with the code amendments. So just to remind you that the code rewrite is bringing forward a package of code amendments, but we want that to come forward with also an effort at affordable housing programs. Those would not be covered by the code rewrite project, but they're part of, I think, another effort. And the kit, I think people are really committed to this. The county's committed to helping. And there was one more thing I was going to say about that. Oh, and we would also like to bring short-term rental amendments together with the code amendments for housing because we think they need to go forward together. So next slide. We looked at 4 prototype sites to test the code amendments. We like you told us, you know, we do have opinions about where the code needs to be amended. We are experts in this, but we wanted to test that and bring you really into the testing process, bring the housing focus group into the testing process. So for about a month and a half before the workshop, we engaged the focus group in a series of Zoom calls and went over these sites with them. One is the downtown site. It's actually where the gas station is right now. The second site is the RV park. And then there are 2 residential infill sites that we tested for middle housing that are not specific sites. Next slide, please. And while we were preparing for the workshop, we also wanted to illustrate how there's some beloved buildings. You know, here we have an example of mixed use downtown, Whitebird Gallery. We have some mixed use midtown projects, the Cannon Beach Hotel and Bald Eagle Coffee House. And we look closely at, you know, the zoning, the number of dwelling units, the parking issues, and found that none of these buildings could be built today. But we just wanted to go through that exercise and kind of make sure that we are correct in our assumption. And then next slide, we also looked at a cottage development that exists on Coos Street South. And also found, you know, similarly, here's a small development, could not be built today. Your code doesn't allow it, but mostly the parking requirement would not permit it. So what we wanted to do was bring forward these examples of things that people, I think, like, but cannot be built under current rules. And next, spent some time thumbing through this book, which I authored years ago to help provide some visual examples of housing, middle housing. And we are talking, when we're talking about infill on residential lots, we're talking about middle housing, which is the housing that's not an apartment thing and not a single. It's all that stuff that's in between, like a duplex or a cottage cluster or even a courtyard apartment. These are all forms of middle housing, and most of them are not built today because zoning codes don't allow them. Next. I spent a lot of time talking about, we actually had a person say that, I think this quote is amazing. It's like designing a village for cars instead of a village for people, which is kind of crazy. So we reached this quite early on, I think, in understanding that parking was definitely a problem. Your current parking requirements were a problem. And that enabled to talk about a lot of kind of a threshold that we reached early. I was very excited about that. And then
That quote was from someone in the focus group.
focus group.
Okay. Are we supposed to keep it? No, I just.
I didn't know if,
It's okay. I don't want to make sure
okay.
where it came from.
I take responsibility.
It's a good quote. It is. I just wanted to pat it on the back.
Next slide, please. We had a really detailed schedule that we kept to on the first day. This is too small to read, but I'll give you the high level. Had whole focus group was there for the first session where we went over a lot of this information. And that's actually where this quote came out of. And then we had smaller groups look in on the different prototype sites. And that happened over the course of the afternoon and the next morning. And then we had a gathering on the last part of the second day, the whole group came again. That is where go through the list of amendments and agree on those this evening. So if I could go through to the next slide, I will start to go through the amendments that we're proposing, starting with prototype site number 1. Eliminate parking requirements. This is for the downtown. Allow options for meeting the current landscaping requirements that don't require landscaping on the horizontal surface. In all of our testing, that really got in the way of us getting a more urban, I should say, village character, kind of downtown Cannon Beach type building. And so we talked about allowing more vertical landscaping. A lot of cities are doing this now, or have done it for a long time. On Hemlock, allow a 3rd story within a dormer. And part of this is really institutionalizing something that already exists, because Whiteberg Gallery already has 3rd story within a dormer, and there are a lot of buildings that also have 3rd stories within a dormer. But kind of a big deal was allowing residential only buildings behind the courtyards at the rear of the site. Right now you have a mixed use requirement, and that prevents you from getting more viable residential buildings downtown. Also eliminating the density restrictions. So these are amendments that the group agreed could move forward. And what I'm hoping from tonight's discussion is people get kind of air their concerns and ask questions, and we move forward with these in a track change amendment package that would come forward in the next few months. There were code concepts that we didn't fully agree on. They need more work. We set them aside to consider for future amendments, such as establishing a maximum building width on Hemlock. So making sure that that pattern of smaller facades is kept. Eliminating the mixed use requirement for buildings on Spruce Street. These were just left on the back burner. On Hemlock, allowing a 3rd story behind a step back, and allowing 3-story buildings behind courtyards at the rear of the site. And then the next couple of slides, I just want to show you some of the visual studies that we prepared and that we used to discuss these issues. For example, here on Whitebird, you can see on the front facade on the upper left, looking from across the street, there's your 3rd story behind a dormer or behind a hipped roof. And yet from the street, you don't see that. And that was a pattern people felt we could see more of. 3rd story behind a dormer or setback behind a hip. There are also, pretty tall buildings like the building on the right that go, have a very vertical wall, just to inventory what is going on in your downtown today. The next slide shows some 3D models that we studied to look at how tall does your current regulations allow you to go 24 feet to a parapet. The middle one shows that example of a 3rd story behind a dormer. And the far right upper corner graphic was to show a step back, which is kind of a variation on the 3rd story behind a dormer. And I think this was considered not ready for to go forward. So this is on the back burner. If we could go to the next slide, I'll show you some of the prototype studies that were done for the gas station site. And on the upper left is what we started with. That is what kind of building you get on the upper left when you meet all the parking requirements and all the horizontal landscaping requirements, and also the mixed use requirements. So you can see it's not a very big building. We couldn't get very many dwelling units. They're not enough to make a viable project. But when we looked at eliminating parking requirements, we could get more buildings on site. We still get parking, but we're able to get a greater number of dwelling units, and we're still able to set the massing back from the street. We're still able to get the commercial use on the ground floor facing Hemlock. The lower left shows the third story behind the dormer. The lower right shows the third story behind the step back, which is, again, we're not going forward with that right now. So this is just some of the work that took place during the course of the workshop. We could go to site 2. I'm going to run through all 4 sites and then I'll pause and we can have a robust discussion. So site 2 is the RV site. If we could go kind of to the next slide, Robert. Everyone is, I believe, familiar with this site. And the next slide, please. Where on the other side of 101 is an area that spent a lot of time describing. I should probably give credit to members of my team that aren't here tonight because I had an amazing partner in Kevin Howard who came to join. He's from Austin, Texas. He's an architect like I am, and he works a lot in 3-dimensional modeling, but also has a lot of experience with affordable housing. And he's also a form-based code expert, as I am. So together we made a good team. He described how the kind of zoning that you see on the opposite side of 101 is often the kind you see in every town, where you kind of put the things that you don't want in your neighborhood over there. It's a hodgepodge. There's a lot of affordable housing there, different kinds of affordable housing. They're not extremely well integrated with each other. They're very segregated. There's the RV park, of course, but there's a commercial entity that serves the RV park and also the nearby area. And there's an interesting zone that allows storage units and residential units in some sort of industrial area. And we talked about how we would like to make, if we're going to be adding a lot of housing to this area, we'd like to make this more of a complete neighborhood and kind of rethink how the zoning is separating all these different uses from each other, how we might be able to build more of a community. So in the next diagram, this is a sketch by Kevin, and we talked about, maybe it's a hamlet, which is kind of a step down from a village in terms of, development, and that we're thinking about how the commercial, that's a commercial zoned area could be part of a service area and incorporate open space and serve the larger neighborhood there. And we could provide better walking environment to the underpass, better lighting, even some things like changing the edge of the substation so that maybe it's an art project, but it's not just a substation, it's kind of contributing to the community. So we also looked at the site ourselves. We could go the next couple of slides. The RV site is very interesting. It was probably developed in a time when you built buffers around things like this use. So as you know, it has a berm and it's been planted with trees. These trees are quite mature. There are mature trees throughout the site, but they're not in clusters or groups where we could say, let's save this group, and let's save this group, and let's build around it. So one of the threshold questions we had to grapple with as a focus group was, are we going to save the trees or are we going to develop housing here? And we came, I believe, to some consensus that the trees did not need to be saved every single one, but we would try to save some. We tried to create open space and place the housing around it, but that getting housing on the site was more important than saving trees. And the next slide just shows a more panoramic view. The next slide shows a very conceptual sketch that Kevin prepared. He did this on the plane actually as he was going back, because the sketch that we had at the workshop was really sketchy, and this is a little less sketchy, but the concept is that it's a mix of housing types, some attached, maybe small apartments, some detached, some cottages, and knitted together through a network of open spaces and green streets and paths with alley serving on the rear so that we can get the parking kind of separated from the green spaces. And it also shows some of these more commercial uses and shared open space toward the south of the site, creating more of a village green or a hamlet green. And also more shared parking spaces there. So this is still just a concept, and that is why on the next slide, I'm going to talk to you about, we didn't find this site ready to move forward with amendments at this time. But we do think that some thinking, the city needs to do some thinking, the focus group, you need to think about, do you support this vision or a vision like this? Can that be better articulated in words and numbers and graphics to a detailed vision? Could these principles and provisions kind of inform what might be a new zone for this area? And then obviously, this is a site that for redevelopment is going to need to, the city will need to enter into an agreement with a developer or developers, formal request for proposals needs to be part of that. And so there are some things that the city needs to undertake to get moving on that side. So it's not really near the point where it would be amendments that would be part of this project. But if there's going to be a commitment to affordable housing here and a mix of affordable and market rate housing here in a really integrated neighborhood, those are all vision. That's a vision that could be promoted and could help you reach an agreement with developers. Okay, so I'm going to move to the last prototypes, which I'm just going to blend together the middle housing residential zone sites, 5,000 and 10,000 square feet. If we could go to the next slide, please. The proposed amendment package here is to reduce the floor area ratio to 0.35 for 1 unit and 0.4 for 2. I'll know that your existing FAR is 0.6 for a 5,000 square foot lot. We would reduce the parking requirement to 1 per dwelling unit, and we would allow on-street parking to count when meeting parking requirements. We would not change the height, but we would allow dormers to be exempt from floor area calculation. And we need to work with city staff to make sure that that language is workable, that it builds on their current definitions for habitable and non-habitable space. I think one of the most important things, though, is that the next 2 bullets, which are eliminate the ADU size requirement for primary and accessory dwelling. That is, allow 2 dwellings to be the same size or smaller, larger, however, is best for the site or the concept for housing, as long as the dwellings meet other requirements for height, setback, and floor area ratio. So the next bullet kind of also puts a pin in that. Allow 2 dwellings on all lots in any configuration, stacked, attached, or detached, allowing a lot of flexibility. And then simplify the lot coverage calculation, working closely with staff to do that. Reduce the front and rear setbacks by 5 feet by right. Additional reductions would be by variance.
See,
Yes.
there's one thing I'm not sure if it's clear to everybody. When you say allow 2 dwellings on all lots in any configuration, that's still staying within that proposed reduced FAR. In other words, for 2 units, it's 0.4.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think people might think it's, you get 3.5 and 3.5 or something, but that's not what was proposed.
0.4 for 2.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for clarifying. Concepts that we put on the back burner are, they were going further and allowing additional units with a little bit more FAR, such as 0.45 for 3 units, 0.5 for 4 units. That is not moving forward at this time. And another was, this was kind of radical, but it's an interesting idea, require new construction to meet the minimum density, require new construction to actually build 2 dwelling units. And lastly, grant additional FAR bonuses for established public benefits. And this would be going further in the direction that we were talking about way back in the beginning of this project when we were talking about public benefits. So that's the proposal for residential sites. And if we could just go through some of the illustrations that we prepared, and then I'll end. So some of the 3-dimensional model testing that we did showed how building in more flexibility about the setbacks, more flexibility about the size of the units and not having a primary and a accessory unit, but allowing them to be stacked, attached, detached, kind of on the right, right side of the page. You can see that there are a lot of different configurations that would allow you to save a tree or avoid a wetland. So a lot of the flexibility that is built into those code amendments, I think, dovetails with the tree proposal, also the wetland proposal. And then the last slide is just an example of, on the left in the blue is your 0.6 FAR and your pretty stringent front and back setbacks, et cetera. You can see that, you can build a very large house and you don't have a lot of room left over for other things. And it's usually just one house. If we loosen up the front and rear setback, for example, or allow the dormer, habitable space in the dormer to not count toward FAR, allowing or reducing the FAR, there's a little bit more flexibility on where the house can be located on the lot. It can move around important things. So those are just examples. The orange shape we call the Jello mold. That's the developable area by setbacks and height. And you can see how these potential house shapes fit within that. And last slide, and then I'll end, is just to remind you, we've talked about this approach before. These are excerpts from the October 2022 Joint Commission presentation when we were talking about public benefits and reducing FAR and then kind of giving it back for public benefit. So that's the end of all the work that the Housing Focus Group did. And I'm happy to take questions, and also I hope that the Housing Focus Group members can help me answer questions too.
Could you just clarify for me, when you talked about eliminating parking, is that for any unit, or would that be only if there's affordable housing? And similarly, when you talk about reducing front and rear yard setbacks, would that be when someone has a long-term unit that they're putting in as opposed to just anyone who wants to, or is that across the board?
So let me go through the residential sites first. It's for any residential development.
So how do we ensure that that doesn't just inure to the benefit of people who are building a large second home here in Cannon Beach?
But I do want to say that the eliminating parking downtown is also eliminating parking for housing downtown. That was another proposal. What I think we tried to explain in the housing workshop was that the middle housing is not necessarily going to address your affordable housing problem. It's going to add to the diversity of housing and the supply, but trying to tie it to affordable housing programs and deed restrictions or land trusts, it's going to be difficult for the residential zone to do. So we really focus more on affordable housing programs on the RV site and the downtown site. And
The word I used was long-term. So I'm specifically questioning, how do we ensure that the homes that are being built and that are receiving the benefit of a reduced setback actually go to people who are planning to live here So my concern is, again, it doesn't have to be affordable, but it would be very easy for someone to say, I'm going to build a vacation home and I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I can be that much closer to the road in front of me. Is that kind of reduces the point of doing this. So I'm just wondering, is there a way to ensure that it's long-term housing?
I think that addressing short-term rentals at the same time can help. But honestly, there's nothing you can do to prevent someone from building a second home.
I'm not trying to prevent, I'm saying if someone is going to come build a second home, I don't think that we should necessarily give up something like our setbacks that easily. So my concern would be, how do we ensure that if someone is taking advantage of, for instance, that piece, it's for residential, long-term housing?
Well, it was on the assumption to begin with, Nikki, that the FAR would change and all that, so the house was gonna be smaller to begin with.
3.5 is 1750.
Yeah, it doesn't answer your question directly, I agree. There were other considerations involved. The setback wasn't automatic. It was an administrative one where staff could make it based upon what was being built. And if it was, in their opinion, a duplex, and making that change would make it possible to do a duplex, that they would do it.
Okay,
So
not just
we need to take
automatic.
it maybe a step farther and define duplex as being one of the units, however we do it, is available for long-term rent. And that's, I think, an additional step we need to go as we start drafting. But that was the thinking on that.
And I think that the idea of reducing the FAR to the extent that that is proposed would also, it makes it going to be building these giant, because a 3.5 for a single family home is 1,750 square feet. And if you're building a duplex, it's 2,000 square feet for 0.4. So that sort of takes away that thing that we've seen happening here when people are building second homes covering their whole lot practically, or as much as they possibly can. And it's vacant most of the year. So.
But I will agree, Marcy, I think it was talked about several times, but we didn't get around to how do we ensure it's available for long-term rental? And that's something we need to, I think.
Yeah, I think if we're talking deed restrictions on those, I think that obviously no short-term rentals. I don't think, from there, you shouldn't be able to just blow out the wall between two units and all of a sudden you have one unit. But I would be uncomfortable restricting it to long-term rentals because I think there's a lot of other uses for properties that it could be. It could be an actual mother-in-law, that kind of situation. And I don't think we should take that out of the formula. And it's not all about what's built now, but it's, what buyer is buying into and what purpose they might use it for.
I could just add a kind of like everything that Mike and Lisa have said is those were discussed, and I think what might not be coming through is that the floor area ratio is a pretty radical change. It reduces the developable capacity of a site. In exchange, though, we're giving more flexibility for front setback and rear setback, and more flexibility to determine what is primary and accessory. The goal is to have smaller housing tends to be more affordable, and a wider variety of housing. You could have now, we will probably see 2 units on a lot more easily now. And the flexibility that we're providing in setbacks also allows you to move things around trees, for example. I think that when we talked about what is the purpose of a front setback, it doesn't really help you. If you're trying to preserve a tree or avoid a wetlands, the front setback is ceremonial. It's not important in the whole scheme of things. The front setbacks tend to be kind of conventional zoning code language that got passed down from the 50s when we were instituting a lot of suburban style zoning. Does it make sense for Cannon Beach today? So I think people generally thought, no, it's not one of your character defining features of your zoning. So maybe we could give up on that.
But I understand what you're saying. We're looking for long-term, either rentals or long-term residents. And it doesn't make any difference what size the house is. It could very well be a second home.
Right.
I mean, I bought a second home and it was 500 square feet. So I mean, yeah, I understand what you're saying. It would be nice to have some way of tying in a requirement, but I don't know how you do it. I don't know if deed restriction might be
But
too reasonable.
even that could, I mean, that could be a condominium kind of situation where there's 2 units on a lot. It could be a condominium situation. At least we're still gaining a different kind of housing here.
Mhm.
I think we need every kind of housing other than that single family, fill up the lot kind of housing.
I think
So-
we need every kind of housing except more. If you look at their figures, 52% are unoccupied full-time
Right.
houses, second homes. I don't think we need any more second homes.
But that was just her concern that,
And I'm not sure what the mechanism.
Yeah, I don't
is.
either.
There's gotta be one. I think there has to be one. It may be through zoning or something. I'm not sure. You can't, about slapping deed restrictions. I don't know if you can even do that legally.
We have talked about vacancy taxes,
Yeah,
right?
It has been,
That's a program to pursue on the affordability side. As I mentioned, this is about the zoning code amendments. It has to come along with these affordable housing programs. That's one that's specifically targeted at discouraging second homes. It doesn't discourage.
Oh.
And all it does is actually collect funds that then you could put back into affordable housing. I mean, it's possible that a vacancy tax could be used to purchase some residential property, establish a land trust, build some cottages that are permanently affordable because they're deed restricted and part of a affordable program.
yeah, I think that's a great idea. I just think that with the amount of money that's poured into individual homes in this, I wonder how much of a deterrent vacancy tax would actually be. That concerns me.
Yeah, I think when we were listening to people speaking, several people said, there's probably nothing we can do about second homes, but you can collect a tax on them, right? And you can use a tax.
Better than nothing.
So I was saying, they're untouchable clearly, but they're not untouchable with their pocketbook. So we can tax them to use that to fund affordable housing.
Yeah,
So it is basically untouchable, but I mean, people with massive amounts of deep pockets, it's hard to get at them, but using a vacancy tax would work.
right. Right now, I think, aren't they all under, at least my understanding was, we don't even know if right now how the courts are going to come down on vacancy taxes, or have they gone through? And I know they have in Canada. I don't know if they have here.
It's really a question for Alyssa,
Yeah.
who is a partner with us and a continuing resource. She's not going anywhere. She wants to be part of what you do here. And so I think,
There's one in San Francisco and there's one in Provincetown, Rhode Island. They have it in place.
I thought they
something
were
people-
challenged, I thought. I thought they were being
I
challenged.
think the Provincetown one is, but the San Francisco one is recent and it's
And-
going for
I guess, so what qualifies as vacancy and how,
183 days.
and how is that policed? So, I mean,
Okay,
it's
we have a
some
couple-
challenges.
Other people will speak. Eric, you want to say something?
Yeah, can you guys hear me pretty good?
Yep.
So I just wanted to roll back or go back to what we were talking about just a minute ago about the vacation rentals in these second units. We didn't really discuss it during our task force meeting, but currently the ADUs are prohibited from being STRs. You can't short-term rent an ADU, but you can short-term rent the bigger house. It's like a weird loophole that we've got currently, but with this new proposal, I think we would need to work into the language somehow that if you're getting that public benefit, or you're getting that FAR back to build that second unit, that there's something in there for not being able to short-term rent it, with being able to essentially get 2 short-term rentals then on a single lot. So I think that's just something to think about while we're talking about that part. And I know we moved on past that conversation, but that's what I had to say there.
Okay, thank you.
I'm assuming that loophole would be reasonably easy to close.
Yep.
I had a number of comments. And my first comment is this is so exciting and really wonderful. I'm really very happy with the work product in total here. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. We had our pie chart with the 3 types of housing. I'd like to see that refined just a little bit, and I'm sure Robert could do this for you in a heartbeat. The STRs are really 3 different things, right? There are dedicated STRs, which are probably the long-term rent them as much as you want kind of permits. We have 42 or something of those right now. And then a number of them would be full-time owners. I myself am a full-time owner, but also an STR holder. So there's a Venn diagram where that overlaps, and that'd be easy to figure out with just cross-reference the STR address with the voter rolls. And the others would be probably second homeowners that sometimes rent. So that we could further refine that a little bit. It didn't look like on the RV park work, you included that parcel, and I can't remember it. It's about 2 acres that is adjacent to the RV park. It's owned by the city. It's not in the Ecola Forest Reserve, and it's not wetland. And it just adds another meaningful chunk of 2 acres there that we could address. Sort of disappointed that we're saying, we're not necessarily highly prioritizing that right now, because that's, as you said, the only real opportunity for affordable or workforce housing in any scale. And I'd really love us to have the resolve to think about a solution for that. And if that leads us to the RV park, great. I think it does, but
Talking about the lot that's
I'm talking about the whole parcel, which is 12 acres. So the RV park plus this other parcel is 12 acres.
I think that other parcel is extremely steep though, and
you're talking about the one
It's right on the road.
north of the last condominium complex.
No, it's directly east of the RV park on the road.
yeah,
That's wet.
It's wet down below, but there's the condominium.
Sorry, it's directly east.
Yeah, I know it's east, but
it's
Yeah.
is it
very-
north of the lot you're talking about, the one that's north of the condominium complex that
Yeah.
go to the top of the hill?
Yeah, yeah.
There was a discussion at one time, many, many years ago about building affordable housing on that. But part of the problem was it was extremely steep and very difficult to build on. So I don't know.
We'll have to clarify that, but I remember looking at the topo maps and I don't think that was the case, but let's leave that aside. It's certainly something we should at least put in the mix. Finally, since there's a definite sense around the table, of course, that we want to prevent these second homeowners from doing their thing. And I would love it if at least as much energy went into the topic of providing affordable and workforce housing as we did in finding a way to gore the ox of the second homeowners. Because it seems like most of the energy around the table.
That's a little bit unfair. I think we came up with some pretty good proposals to get at workforce, at workforce housing. I think, you know, when we walked in, it's not that we deprioritized the RV park, it's that we didn't have the expertise at the table. And
Understood.
honestly, we have to take it through. It requires a lot of resource on the part of the city right now to figure out how they go about doing something like that.
Yeah.
It's not that anybody objects. Everybody said, great. We have two parties here. We have Chet and we have the city and they want to do a deal, but it's not that simple. So I don't know, Steve.
Yeah, this is a good segue. You know, one of the things that we were talking about is the infrastructure, sewer, water, things like that, you know, undersized for residential development. So what does that mean? That means that a developer is probably going to come in and go like this to the city, that I'll do the affordable housing. You guys help me out in terms of dollars needed to put in new infrastructure.
Yeah.
So some of the thought was whether or not we would get it to a point in time of continuing the discussion and then maybe going out for an RFP. But based on all the city projects right now, that's going to be a decision that the council would have to face in terms of, okay, we say we want to do this, but how much money are we willing to put on the table to get it done? So those are, you know, real legitimate. One of the things you mentioned, Michelle, was just the tax. You know, could a second home tax be used for money, for infrastructure, for a request for a proposal, for the work that's required to do to get all the information to see if it's feasible. And then at that point, you know, so that could be a way of getting dollars to help potentially fund an affordable project out there. But there is a lot of, it's good to have the discussion and put it on the radar, but it's going to be expensive, and the city and the council needs to be aware of that. And because anyone who's going to come to us is going to put their hand out and say, hey, I'm willing to do this, but I need your help to do infrastructure, roads, what have you.
They're for sure going to want that.
Right.
But so the way I've conceptualized it is the property itself is about 12 acres. If you were selling it to a developer to just do what you will, knock yourself out, it's R3, put 100 homes there.
Right.
It's probably worth $12 million. Okay. If you then start layering all these restrictions on them, it's going to devalue it quite a bit, but it will still have value. And so my guess is you'll still sell that property with all the development restrictions to a developer for $3 or $4 million. You might have to spend a couple of million of that to do the infrastructure. But I'm not sure that at all that this is a cash negative thing. I actually think it's probably cash positive for the city. What do I know? I don't really know. But an RFP proposal would be the way to figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
I don't
you know,
think we have enough expertise other than the developer to come in and say, hey, here's what we can do.
But I was thrilled to see what they drew, which was mixed forms. You know, you're going to have some multi-unit, some single family, some duplexes, whatever. And that's exactly what would really work well on that property. And maybe not all of it is affordable. Maybe some of it is market rate stuff, because anything that is market rate will subsidize the project, will give you value.
You're going to have some, you get the mix, but you're going to have some market rate in order to get the affordability for it to pencil out for a person constructing the project.
Right.
So one of the things I thought I understood from Chet was that the city needed to maintain ownership of the land in order to have the leverage to ensure that it stayed affordable, or whatever the word is. So I don't see us selling the RV park personally, because I think that gives up something that we really need to maintain, and that's the ability to control what
But
the
you
long
can do
term.
that with deed restrictions.
Well, again, and I'm no expert, but I recall the conversations we've had, and my sense was that the only way to really ensure that we could maintain it was to own the land. And I may be wrong, but was my.
I think that's going to definitely affect, I mean, I think what you're talking about is the city could actually have in perpetuity affordable housing.
That's what we're always, I mean, that's always seems.
Exactly. That if we retain it, we can have in perpetuity affordable housing. If we sell it, then it becomes worth, like you're talking about, it becomes worth less and less the longer that term of affordable housing. And at some point, it would expire.
Mhm.
So those are all the things that we have to weigh in this.
And I'd like to say, Tim, that I think that all of us came into this focus group, our energy was all just totally focused on trying to.
I apologize if I sounded disparaging in that. It was really the commentary around this table tonight. There was a whole lot of.
Well, because one of the tools that we see that will allow us to do this is to reduce the ability to build big mega mansions.
I think
You know, so-
part of one of my ground rules, Tim, was if all we do is succeed in facilitating more large homes and second homes, we've failed miserably. So it's not anything against second homes. It's just not what we need right now.
Totally get that, concur, I'm on board. It also, that energy to reduce second homeowner ownership doesn't do anything for our housing supply, and we all know that.
We know that.
Yeah.
Okay, Clay has his hand up. Clay?
Hi, thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Couple things. Steve, you mentioned the infrastructure being a big deal with the RV park. Is that the primary reason that this was considered not something that was front and center in terms of actions to be taken more sooner than later?
It was certainly up there,
Okay,
is having a better understanding of just what those costs actually are in order, it was a question mark that we didn't have an answer to. So based on that, it's hard to go full steam ahead without knowing the answers to some of these questions.
got it. And then the second part was, and I'm certainly no expert on this, but I wonder if there isn't some way to frame some of what needs to be done at the RV park in terms of its infrastructure in a way that would fall under some of the new infrastructure deal that's being run through right now. I don't know if there's water lines out there that need to be upgraded for water quality that, while you're improving the line, you could be improving the size. That sort of thinking around some money that is out there that is waiting to be dispersed. Anyway, just an idea. No expert on it, but it might be worth looking into. Thanks.
I think the other aspect to that is how much money do you want to put ahead of time when someone else could come in and say, well, here's what I want to do, and now you have it all in the wrong place.
But it's part of the RFP process.
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, what I'm saying is we shouldn't do everything and jump to doing upsizing when we're not quite sure. But yes, that would,
Yeah.
the RFP with some of the experts and proposals would come in and give us a much better understanding of what we could see there and some of those costs.
Yeah. Can I circle back on the downtown parking?
Yeah.
Are we proposing that for existing businesses, they would no longer have to maintain the parking spaces that they've already created?
We recommend that a parking management study be done separately, quickly, but separately from this. So this would not affect existing parking arrangements. It would only affect new development.
New development.
But a parking management study a parking management plan, I should say, needs to be, we need an updated parking management plan.
Whether it was Michelle or whoever made that quote, I love the idea.
It's meat.
It was, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes. I mean, I
Can't believe that.
I love the idea that could have these fantastic downtown places to live. The only thing that would be missing is a parking spot, but so what? You know, attract people who can get around or by foot or, you know, park in the municipal lot.
I think during the slow times of year, those people also would benefit some of the businesses that they're living above as well,
Absolutely.
full time.
Or we have resident parking permits. I've had a similar question about what's happened to some of the existing, some people paying into the fund. I think of developments like the Landing that have the lot on the corner of Third and Hemlock. That is currently an empty lot just for parking for the Landing. So does that make that available for potential housing? So there's a lot for us to look at in making that change. But if we can make the change, at least for,
Invisible spot.
what's that?
I pay $250 a year for an invisible spot.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if that's the study you're talking about, but we need to look at all of that, how we transition that to something that makes more sense.
Purpose of a parking management plan, it was to figure out how you're using your current parking space, all of it, and how to use it better.
So I really liked some of the concepts you came up with for further development in the commercially zoned areas. I thought that was an area that I thought was really cool. I didn't even know we already had a third story, you know, so it's not obtrusive. And I do think that I've always felt like parking was a bigger part of our problem than not. And so I would encourage the city to move on parking in a big way, whatever that means, because so many things can't be done because we can't meet the parking piece of it. But I don't have the answer. But my question was residential specifically. I thought that things like reduced lot line setbacks and maybe reduced parking requirements were going to be tied into that community benefit notion. But it sounded like that's not the way you were presenting them tonight, that they were more, we're going to make those changes almost carte blanche.
I think when I don't know if others were thinking less, but it was kind of like on that setback reduction, the part of the problem for people who might want to build a property at a level that most people can get into is, forgot what I was gonna say, geez. Anyway, ask your question again and I'll be able to answer, but, would you ask one more time?
Well, okay, so I think I said, I thought that things like the setback,
Oh, yeah.
reducing the setbacks was gonna be tied to some.
I'm sorry, yeah, it was more thinking that we were gonna reduce the costs in some way and the expense of actually building, but also the uncertainty of getting changes people need to build what they're supposed to. And, you know, we've heard it a couple of times, you know, nobody wants to go through the planning commission. Well, you know, ordinarily that would have to come to us and maybe there's some level of setback and it's really 5 feet on the front and 5 feet on the back. That community development can handle just fine. And then beyond that, then it needs to come to. Yeah.
But that wasn't the only reason. That wasn't the only reason, Les. The other reason was it allows more flexibility for protecting trees and wetlands.
Yeah, well, and I
That
appreciate it.
was a big part of this.
Yeah, but they don't have to come to us to do that. They can talk to Robert and Steve and, you know, if it's gonna save a tree or a wetland, then they don't have to come to planning commission for that small change. So it just seemed like one of those things that we could make that would take some of the uncertainty of the process out.
Did the committee consider eliminating the requirement for DRB for ADUs and duplexes?
Well, we didn't at this point. We haven't gotten there yet.
That is That is part of the next bit of work, though, because we do want to bring the city into compliance with state rules.
Yeah, I think Marcy mentioned that that might be illegal before, and
We're just not there yet. We're just in the beginnings.
It's not might be, it is, correct?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Is.
Well, if we're not referring to it as an ADU going forward, with these changes, that it's just 2 dwelling units, they're really, it wouldn't fit the definition of what goes to DRB anymore, correct? What currently goes to DRB?
Right.
duplexes go to DRB as
It
well.
does, yeah.
But
Oh, okay. I guess I didn't.
the state still has a rule that middle housing should not be subject to clear, should only be subject to clear and objective standards. And while that doesn't apply to cities as small as Cannon Beach, but we think it will eventually. So we should get ahead of the game on that.
Are there zoning changes that will go hand in hand with these 2 dwelling units on a lot? Or is that still considered R1, R2?
Keep the math the same. I mean, you could actually eliminate the distinction between R1 and R2.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Is that R2 is duplexes, right? Yes. And so if we're just gonna allow, two dwelling units everywhere, maybe you just erase the difference.
Yeah, that's exactly my question.
I liked the idea of making the R2, making people have to build 2, because I guess the presidentials and everybody else thought it was a little too crazy. Like, hey, it's not.
Not gonna work, though.
But I just feel like, just because we haven't seen it here, and it seems so like out there, but it exists. I mean, we have other building restrictions.
I don't know.
Seems to me like at least we're incentivizing it through the FAR changes.
Yeah, totally.
But I wonder, it's nice that we limit the FAR for the single family, because that does solve our problems of just another large empty second home. I just wonder if only going to 0.4 is enough incentive.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure about the numbers. I heard the example, and I don't know if these would be accurate, at 1750. Or then it would allow you to go to 2000. So, 1750 for a single family residence, okay, that's livable. But 2000 for a duplex becomes, okay, 1,400 square feet for a primary residence and 600 for a secondary unit. I'm just not really sure that that's
Yeah, I totally.
a lot of incentive for someone to go that route.
I think in essence, we're disincentivizing the thing that we're trying to solve for. If you reduce FARs for.
I think we're getting closer to it. I just don't think we've incentivized it enough. I think that
Maybe 0.5.
0.4 growing so that it really does incentivize it and makes 2 reasonable housing units.
What
He picked those numbers.
reasonable square footage?
What's that?
What do you think would be a reasonable square footage for that to make, if you were going to give additional FAR back for 2?
Me, I probably a minimum of 1,000 and 1,000, but
That's actually what I asked.
that's what we're at now, but is that really incentivizing somebody who wants to live here and have a second reasonably sized unit? I'm not sure it is, maybe 1,400 and 1,000.
Which puts you at 0.5, not 0.6.
Well, we picked these numbers and to open the discussion, actually.
Yeah.
We went as low as we felt reasonable, and just to open the discussion.
We want guidance.
I think the 3.5 for a single family house makes total sense.
I can live with that. I just would rather see, if you're going to do 2 units, something like 0.5.
That might be, yeah, I could see that,
At least.
not at least.
Well, 0.5, so you can still, that builds a reasonable size ADU and a reasonable size.
And it does provide some incentive for someone to go that.
It's a meaningful incentive.
From 3.5 to 5 is a meaningful incentive.
Yeah.
And if you incorporate the
attic space, it really does. You know, with that.
Yeah, Kevin's,
Put an apartment in a dormer, or you could put a room in a dormer that adds.
Yeah, and that won't count towards the FAR.
Yeah.
I keep imagining tiny little second homes now. Everybody's like, well, I put two
But,
homes.
but you still have the height limit. That doesn't change. And with-
Can I ask a question on the downtown zone again? You mentioned you didn't move forward with that model that had essentially a deck on the,
Step back.
yeah, and a setback,
Step-
which, and I mean, I just think that would be spectacular. Why are we not?
Because some of us didn't like that. We didn't want to change the look of the downtown.
what I was going for was amongst the housing focus group, what did everybody agree on? We literally took a vote.
Yeah,
Is this an amendment you all can agree on? And if it wasn't something that not all people could agree on, we just set it aside. And the goal is to get this through, right? To get it, to forward this in the next few months.
It does kind of lend itself to a little more modern of a look, and I don't know if
I see that.
there's ways to, I mean, I think that's what everybody's reacting to is the peaked.
I'm talking about light too. Light is huge and light has a lot to do with the height of buildings.
But yeah, I don't know if there's anything that can be done in design restrictions that would
So
still.
what is the peak height then if we adopt that? Does it change or are we still at 28 feet with a dormer?
Yeah.
Yes,
It doesn't change the
depending on
height.
the roof pitch.
Right,
Yeah, 512.
right. But there's actually, you can fit well, I would want the dormer apartment myself. I always wanted them, but,
What if we gave like 2 more feet to make the dormer really work?
I think it works without the 2 feet if it's done right.
Well, you can do the math, but
I'm more than happy to discuss it.
pardon?
I'm more than happy to discuss
Well,
it.
just, you're the builder around the table here.
But what you're saying is true. You get more useful space if you increase the height. If you increase the height, then you get the near certainty that it'll be more controversial.
But, just in the commercial zone, just downtown, maybe 2 feet, you definitely get much more usable space on that.
Absolutely agree with that point.
Yeah.
I agree with the point that you get more usable space, but I wouldn't like to see it happen.
Was there any thinking, and then this might not even been appropriate, but some of the houses that are currently being built are basically flat roofed.
God,
And I find that unattractive and not very much like Cannon Beach, but does that come into this? I mean, or is that going to be acceptable for that?
Requiring a peaked roof, you mean?
Yeah,
I don't think we got to any of the design review stuff yet.
you're talking doors
Design.
that implies a peaked roof.
We didn't get
Yes,
to any of
you
them.
can't- by reason of its design, you're not going to get that 3rd-story living space with a flat roof.
But we didn't, our discussion never went that far. It never
Didn't get there
did.
yet, but.
Less, yeah, well, yeah.
But the idea behind the dormers was actually to encourage, by exempting it from FAR, to encourage the pitched roof shape and the dormer shape.
I don't have a negative reaction to flat roofs. I mean, Cannon Beach Hotel and the 2 buildings next to it feel like they're the best part of Midtown, and I believe they have flat roofs.
It's a commercial.
Bruce's. Yeah, are we only talking about residential here?
I thought he
And I probably am only really talking about residential. I probably should have been more clear.
Yeah,
So residential has a
I have a flat roof.
penalty for it's flat. You can only go to 24 feet if you're less than a 512 roof.
The Midtown example is only 2 stories. Right, and so the difference was in the downtown, we talked about a 3rd story in a commercial zone, in the downtown commercial zone, a 3rd story under a pitched roof or a dormer.
So would that 3rd story be 28 feet or would that be higher?
It's taller. It's, I believe it's 28 to the midpoint, according to the way that you measure. Is that correct?
I thought it was within the same height, it was within height requirements we have now, I thought.
Yes, we're not changing the height requirement.
So it'd be the same height.
Yeah,
Like if you just were to pull up that image, Robert, on page, 8, which shows the mixed use downtown and the mixed use midtown buildings. It's pretty easy to see the 2 stories versus 3 stories. On the right are the Cannon Beach Hotel and the coffee shop. And on the left is the downtown mixed use. So that 3rd story underneath the pitched roof and behind that hip roof, that's something we talked about for the downtown commercial zone.
Brandon, does that look like a 512 roof to you? It doesn't to me.
No, it's less,
Yeah,
which it just means that's how they chose to do it.
but that would not be allowed.
The
Concept, maybe not that specific dimension, but the concept would be that, correct?
Yeah, and I don't know how the current code allows for the switch pitch. Does it have to continually have the 512? Or can it have a portion of it be the lower pitch around the edges? I'm not sure how that's accounted for.
That's what's gonna need to be clear.
an objective.
the next clear and objective design standards set of amendments.
I think we're on the right track here with those kinds of changes, but I also think that we probably need to make it a priority to be looking at the RV park. And I know there's a lot more work that needs to be done, but I think that needs to be a priority for us to see what needs to be done and start making some progress on it.
You know, the last day when we talked about the RV park, when we had done a lot of the study and then we were moving forward into what could be the code amendments. On that second day, we didn't have Alyssa from the county with us. And I think that's a big gap. We need to go back and talk to her about this site because I think she's being the one who can talk about affordability and larger projects that are being done around the county and infrastructure, funding. She's the one that could help, I think, move some of those issues forward faster. But we didn't have her on the second day, so we kind of need to loop back with her on this site.
It would be great if the council would empower the city manager or Robert or someone to explore RFPs. Doesn't cost you anything to see what a public-private partnership would look like.
I think that's premature. Because we don't even really know what we want yet, for sure. So I'm not anxious to,
So we want
well, I mean,
a bunch of houses there.
we need to flesh it out more, the plan, before we do that. I think it's just too soon to,
Yeah, I mean, I loved what the picture looked like. I'd like to see the details, but
just a picture.
There aren't any.
There's no details.
I mean, that was the drawback of, the 2-day discussion is that we got to a point where there were more questions than answers. And it needs to be fleshed out from here forward. Lisa's absolutely spot on. But it is the consensus that we all came to, including Steve and Robert's participation in this, is that from a staff perspective, there were so many questions and so many unknowns that in order to move forward, we're going to have to come to a consensus among the council and decide what we want to do in order to move forward.
But yeah, I think we have a debate to go, you know, gotta look at the private developer, but also look at the city-owned deed restricted, potentially working with.
Go down both paths at the same time.
Uh,
And I am sure there are consultants that will help you do that. In fact, I know in Clatsop County, there are consultants.
kind of looking, and maybe that's where Melissa's gonna help us with, you know, what are those options we can
Yeah, I
start to
think
look
that's our
at.
next step.
Right, we haven't
the
even made
RV
the
park.
decision yet that we want to give up the RV park. That hasn't, we haven't even made that decision.
Right.
We're not even there yet.
But we can make that decision until we have researched what we can do
Right.
with that space. And we
Right.
haven't fully done that.
Right, I
Yeah.
agree.
And yeah,
No,
Huh.
no, I know.
weighing it against, you know, its income and, I mean, there's a whole lot of things to look at
Yeah.
there. So it's gonna take some work, but I hope we do make it a priority to look at it.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
I think what I would like this evening is permission to move forward with this package of code amendments and develop these further. Incorporating some of the comments that we've received, like the 3.5 to 5 FAR. And the next meeting, you know, might be, this is set inside the RV sites, pursue that with city separately, on a different track, but in terms of the code amendments, actually beginning to draft those and bringing them to the planning commission next, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
You had a timeline that you thought might work for all of this. For the next 6 months, I thought.
I thought we could probably do this in 3 to 4 months.
Let's do 3.
It is summertime. Lots of people are. But yes, I think if you kind of bless the process, bless the place that we have arrived at and allow us to move forward, I would continue to work with the focus group and bring a set of code amendments to the planning commission at some point later this summer.
Would we be able to look at those, but the entire group would look at those first before they go to the planning commission?
If that's.
Yeah, I think that's a good.
Yeah.
That's really
Especially if we're
important.
gonna work through the focus group.
Also, Marcy, I don't know, did you send, you may have, and I wasn't aware of it, but that list of things. I know what's in this packet here, but that what's in the city packet, but did the rest of this group get those actual numbers that you sent out, or did we just,
The numbers?
well, the presentation you did tonight, did everybody get all of that who's on this group?
Yes.
Okay,
Packet consisted of all of the code amendments that I went through
okay.
and the code concepts.
Well, I'm seeing it's not in my packet.
The electronic packet that I'm looking at actually only had about half the pages that you showed.
Yeah,
I was going to bring
true.
to Robert after the meeting.
That's what why I was wondering, because I got a packet that didn't have all but I saw it online, so it was fine.
But that's saying you didn't get to see all of that?
No, I don't think I think,
Hey, wait,
I'm looking at what's
if you look at the
on the city.
first 3 pages of the packet. Just 1, 2, and 3, that's the same list that I just went through. It goes by site. So on page 2, it starts with site 1, downtown mixed use site proposed amendments.
I mean, I got it online, so I'm just,
See what you're saying. So it's in the
It's in
cover.
the
and-
packet on the first few pages, the list of all the code amendments that are being proposed.
I'd like to see the pages that you added that we didn't get in the packet, which are the diagrams of the various
That's correct.
potential. Huh?
That's correct.
Your presentation from tonight, I'll just email it to everybody.
Great.
Thank you,
okay,
Jen.
that'd be great.
Thank you for pointing out that it's actually in I skipped right over that.
It's right up front there, so you can't.
At least
And I did, yes.
At least with regard to the code process, the RV park doesn't really require anything, does it? I mean, that, we can do the RV park.
It requires a rezone.
It would require a rezone, but it doesn't require any specific work for the code rewrite process.
It might, depending on which direction you go. For example, there's a process for sale of government property in there that may not anticipate what we do with it. So there, I think the city needs to decide how it wants to proceed, and then we can, there are a few, yeah.
But it could definitely be dual track.
Yeah, it can. Once somebody decides how they want us to move forward, there's a lot to think about.
Did the group have a sense of all of the options that you looked at? What would be the most likely to generate new desirable housing? Of
RV park.
It's the RV park is my sense, but is that, am I missing something?
You can target that to anything you want.
I thought downtown,
Yeah, downtown too.
I
You're
thought-
creating more units, but they're gonna be more in,
it's a little less than MB too.
yeah,
if
it's
you're
gonna
in
be a
downtown.
little higher end unit.
Good point.
All a little more long-term.
Marcy, can you find out about the vacancy tax and where it stands and if it has been actually instituted without a challenge at this point, or
Yes,
that would be interesting to know.
I'll talk to Alyssa about it.
Okay, yeah, that would be great.
I heard they were doing it down in Wheeler, but I'm not sure.
They were what?
And down in Wheeler, in Roanoke County.
Right, you mentioned that.
I'll find it.
I know they're discussing it in Sisters. Or vacancy tax.
Well, Wheeler has no STRs, zero, but they have vacation rental, 30 days, but there's zero STRs. I mean, I know it's a tiny town, but.
Did you get your answer?
I'm
Are you waiting for it?
kind of waiting for an answer.
Yes, let's go forward.
Yeah.
I agree.
I mean, it's not a formal vote because it's a work session, but the direction that you're going. we would like you
Absolutely.
to
The
proceed.
recommendations are very good.
The code amendments would, we have to work on what those would look like.
Can I just hear from the housing focus group members? Are you willing to participate in a few more meetings?
Yes, absolutely. I love the charrette now.
She's gonna have her own.
Marcy, how?
From Lisa, please.
In your 3 to 4 month timetable, fitting in that parking study? Because that seems to be like a fairly complicated.
I actually don't see the parking management study as part of this.
Okay,
Yes. We're
so we,
talking to the city about that as potentially a separate project.
Yeah.
There may be state help also to help you get that, especially since it was described in your TSP.
we did have one done, not necessarily recently within the last 3 years, but it's certainly been like.
I've been the last 6 years, some,
5 or 6 years, yeah.
Yeah. It was a very detailed study.
Are we really looking at something that's more specifically related to downtown?
this was downtown.
Residential?
Downtown, yeah.
Yes,
I mean, I think that's.
and this was citywide,
I think
but it's
that's-
done.
No, this is
Definitely, I think that's desirable, having more apartments and life downtown. I mean.
Mhm.
Well, there's a lot of life in the tourist.
But I mean, I work super late, it's dead, and there's like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few people that live downtown.
I think, when I think of residents downtown, I totally agree with you there. But when I think of that, I think of Ecola Square, and those are, high-end condominiums that go for sale. So the ones that we're looking at hopefully will be a more of affordable middle housing that people can afford and live in long-term
Yeah.
and live in permanently. So that's I'd like to see.
Speak for myself, Nancy, is that the more we talked about it, it seemed to me, my recollection is that I would be surprised if there was a real affordability component. to
That's
it.
what I'm concerned about. Yeah, I'm concerned about that.
Okay.
It's what I would.
That is true.
Yeah, it's what I would prefer, but that's what I'm concerned about.
Translate into the lower rents.
Yeah.
Marcy,
But I think again, market rate, even market rate housing is needed here.
Yeah, the middle housing, but we're not just talking
Yeah.
about.
affordable, we're
workplace,
talking about.
affordable, we're talking about middle housing, so more housing creates. more.
Marcy,
And that's what I think we all agreed on,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to address your,
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree that that's probably where, but my preference is to have long-term residential housing downtown. People can afford, that is my big dream. Whether that ever gets achieved or not, but I guess I would say I would hope that we would go away from the high-end, condominium.
point of this, in my, opinion.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the whole focus of this,
yeah,
is not to build
yeah,
apartments for,
yeah.
I
I just don't know how to avoid,
don't either.
that's the
I
problem.
don't know, but I think there must be a mechanism.
Marcy, is there anything in that whole downtown plan that would give us more the desired result of at least more affordable market rate things rather than just expensive condominiums?
I know that changing your parking requirements is gonna change things immediately. And a lot more development becomes potential, viable. I think you may have to identify. I think you may have to work with some affordable housing providers about specific developments to make that happen. But it becomes more possible when you don't have this parking requirement. I think the site that we're talking about as a prototype site, if that goes forward, that would also probably be an RFP project that the city would foster in some way.
Are you talking the gas station?
Yes.
That's privately owned, though.
Not sure unless there was ownership. I don't know how that would come into play.
Isn't that still owned by the Moon?
City own any property downtown?
the park.
The park.
Not.
Big condominium complex.
Mars, couldn't we, I
I
thought,
guess I don't have an easy answer for you, Gary, sorry.
we talked.
Yeah,
But we could specify, if you get enough units and you incentivize, you could specify, we want 10% of these to be at a certain level based, quality good, but maybe smaller and a little less appointed. I think you could probably do that.
10% isn't enough.
Well, whatever it happens to be, 25% or 50, right? But, as you start moving up the list, the fewer developers you're gonna have that take it on.
How does
If that's-
that work for a single project that might have
And,
two?
well, that's what we're talking about, duplexes, right? We just decided that.
No, I'm talking about downtown stuff.
There's some kind of give back, on the commercial development that incentivizes that kind of thing, I guess is.
I don't.
You're just thinking of the thing that the planning commission just approved, which I thought was spot on. But it was a low income,
It was an ADU.
it was an ADU, that's all, yeah.
Is it?
And you could do something like what's been proposed at First and Spruce at one point, where they came to us for variance to reduce the percentage of commercial. So maybe you keep the same requirement for mixed use, 49 to 51%, but if you come in with affordable units, then you can increase that percentage. So that's another incentive
That's smart.
Yeah.
system.
It's a kind
And
of
just to-
public benefits thing we really need to dig into and see how those all play out.
And are we waiving the parking requirement downtown for added residential?
Yes.
What if I'd stay, commercial?
Sorry, what?
What if they wanted to just build a fully commercial building when we still offer zero parking?
That's a good question.
Reduce it at least. I mean,
I don't think so. It's to get you more residential. That's the,
That would be hope. I'm just trying to.
yeah, but that's a good point.
But yeah, it might be a two-part thing where, I mean, right now, we've got some empty lots downtown that if they rebuilt them, they would be half parking lot and half structure.
Exactly.
And,
Back to where we were.
yes, absolutely. It'd be the ugliest downtown ever.
Yeah.
But
That's what you have to.
somehow we need to solve that, and then we need to incentivize the downtown, residential.
We don't need another.
I thought Vicky's idea of, I thought that was might work. It might actually work.
Clay, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep. Yes, we can.
Yes, okay, thank you. Just kind of going along with what Mickey said, I think if you tied there's a way to tie parking to housing and a specific type of housing, rental housing versus fee simple housing. You would disincentivize, you'd shut down people coming in and condo converting or creating new housing for condominiums if they had a parking requirement tied to housing that wasn't related to rental housing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Long-term rental. Yes.
Right.
I'm just going to repeat what I think my assignment is.
Good luck. Solve the world's problems.
This one little problem. I'm going to continue to work with the Housing Focus Group on refining the code amendments that have been identified. I'm going to talk to Alyssa and the city also about the RV site and vacancy tax. I can also ask her about, how to support more affordable housing downtown in conjunction with the code amendments. And then when we have a more well worked out set of code amendments, I'll bring it back to the Joint Commission, and then we'll move to the Planning Commission. And we try to do this in the next 3 to 4 months.
That sounds good. And I add one other thing to your assignment? Ask Alyssa. To ask her, I'm just curious.
Short-term rentals, I'm sorry, and we're going to close some loopholes and try to fix the short-term rentals.
I'm curious about rent control, because I've heard that mentioned several times by community members wishing that there was rent control, or I don't know how that works. I know there is rent control in Portland, but it's still doesn't work that well because everything's so expensive there. But I'm wondering how that's a thing that happened, if a city did, or if how it works, if it's done anywhere.
We can ask
Might have some information on that.
There may be that one of the Joint Commission sessions that we have there. And we tee up all these questions ahead of time so she can come prepared to discuss.
That'd be great.
I think technically all of Oregon's rent control, but it's 10% a year.
Right, which is a lot.
Yeah, like.
Yeah.
Your rent can double in like 6 years.
And
Yeah,
salary isn't.
They control some increases.
Yeah,
that,
but yeah,
Yeah, 10%.
I'm pretty sure city by city.
10% for, you have a $2,000 apartment for a one-bedroom apartment, and it's going up $200. I mean, yeah.
Okay. So is there anything else people would like added to Marcy's homework assignment?
I had one question, but I don't want to add to the homework assignment. But I heard there was some conversation in the past about, and I forget what the exact phrase was, but it was where you took an existing house and you were able to divide it up so that it became multiple units. There was a phrase for that. Anyway, we apparently have got a lot of houses that sit empty most of the time. Is there any way that someone could be incented to flex? That's what it was called. And we talked about that for a while as another way to maybe get some additional units.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You mean like turning in the unused second homes and having like a part of their home?
Yeah, I mean, which is a little different to me than building an ADU. It's something that you do internally, but you still got the parking requirements and some things that you have to deal with maybe, but to me,
Wait, you're talking about building an apartment in like unused.
in the existing structure.
Okay, that's it.
Well, right now, that I don't think that would even be allowed, or I guess depending, maybe in R1, it wouldn't be allowed because you don't have
Detail.
kitchen.
Interesting question. If we're going to say 2 dwelling units are permitted in R1 and R2 in any configuration, there's nothing under that new rule, there wouldn't be anyone prevented from carving out a flex space.
Yes,
Right.
in a second home.
Right.
yeah,
And maybe we just need to make it clear that that's an option.
yeah.
You're meaning flex space, I don't really understand.
Well, yeah, I don't totally understand this concept. I'm not sure I've really seen it, but I always pictured Cannon Beach, I think I mentioned this once before, that those second homes would provide nice places for artists in residence, you know?
Oh, yeah.
You could take a downstairs, a portion of it downstairs, give it a separate entry, carve it off so that it's fire separated as considered a second unit by the building department. You know, it'd be like an internal ADU, basically. And then there, if somebody wanted to do that to their second home, they could do it under this new rule.
Turning a single family home into a duplex essentially and adding a kitchen.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that might fit in the mix.
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah. Marcy,
I don't know if there's ways to additionally incentivize it, but
Yeah, I don't.
since we are,
Pay the vacancy tax if you do
yep,
that.
Yeah, right, because you have somebody, right?
can you also add shifting ADUs and duplexes to administrative review rather than design review to your potential list?
I think that's what we have to do. Yes, I think that's what we're talking about. Okay,
That's something the focus group is gonna
yes.
discuss, yes.
All right, well, focus group, we have more work to do.
And
good work so far.
when you'd like to start, is it a couple weeks, a month?
I think we talked about having a joint commission in June, but I think we'll skip that. We should just have a meeting or 2 scheduled in June. So what we should probably do, starting next week, is send out some potential dates. I think Zoom for a couple and then in person might be good for like a third.
Agree.
You agree with the in person?
I sure like in person.
No, the Zoom to start.
Okay,
Yeah. But in person really is, and we seem to get twice
very
done,
productive if people can spare the time.
right?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Anything else? So once again, I'd like to thank the members of the focus group for continuing to work towards this solution. Thanks to Design Review and Planning for joining us. And anybody have anything for good of the order? Bird? Okay. Thank you, Marcy. Thanks, Robert.
Everybody.
Thank you. Meetings